Hey, you made it.
Yes.
I hope you were up here for other business. Just here? Yeah. Okay. We're gonna, you have handouts. At the very beginning, we should, hand out. But that way, we need to, just wait till. We're in speed.
I did bring my, maybe I should take notes. Yeah, I could.
I knew you're gonna be sharing time with other people.
How are you? Oh,
What do you think?
Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the October 11th edition of our community meeting powered by the Ward 1 NPA. And as usual, we're going to start our I'd like to welcome everyone to the delay. Probably like and as usual, we're going to start our we turn that on.
No, please. I'll move my stuff. Sorry.
So we're ready? Okay. So again, you're all welcome. I'll be your host. My name is Tom Darenthal. I'm a member of the steering committee. I live on Nash Place. And as usual, we're going to go around the room. Everyone can introduce themselves. And tonight we're going to try something that's a little bit different than what we've done in past meetings. If you have a speak out subject, let me know when you introduce yourself and I'll call on you when we get to the speak out part. You'll have opportunity to raise your hand. You'll have opportunity to raise your hand and add to the speak out conversation, but it'll make it easier organizationally if you just tell me up front what your speak out topic would be. So we're going to start right here.
Yeah.
Just introduce yourself.
My name is Enrique Bueno. I'm with Vermont Passive House, a nonprofit organization with the mission to inform the public as well as the government on the benefits of the Vermont Passive House, of the Passive House building standards.
Good. Sharon?
I'm Sharon Busher. I live on East Avenue.
Richard Hilliard, Highgrove Court.
Mary Munger on North Street.
Noah, Annalise, and Brian Riley of Waterbury, Vermont, and we're here in support of the high efficiency building presentation that Enrique is going to present on.
Carter Newbezer, Colchester Ave, although I got some news. We're officially under contract for a place on Riverside, so I might be on Riverside.
Rob Gutman, North William Street.
Catherine Bach, North Prospect.
This is ours.
Sorry.
I'm Angie Chapel-Sokol from North Prospect Street.
Kathy Alwell, North Prospect.
Jonathan Chapel-Sokol, North Prospect, and a member of the steering committee. And I do have an announcement.
I'm Emily Garcia, and I'm here from UVM Student Government.
Mila Grant, City Councilor for the Central District, and I'm visiting today to talk about some public safety issues.
Hi, it's Sarah Hernandez-Tim. I'm the Public Information and Community Engagement Officer with the BPD, and I believe I'm in Ward 4.
Julia Curry, I live on Chase Lane.
Gary Golden, Calarco Court.
Thank you. Microphones everywhere. Hi, everyone. Martine LaRoque-Ulick. I live in Ward 4 on Nottingham Lane, and I'm here just to say hello. I am in the Vermont Senate, also on the Burlington School Board. And if I get a few minutes during Speak Out, that would be great. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Carol Livingston. I live on Calarco Court, and I'm also on the steering committee.
Samantha Ayotte,
20 Chase Street, part of the old East End, and Joel is still outside cooking burgers, but Joel Collada also lives with me as well.
I'm Greg Hancock. I live on Henry Street.
Kathleen Donahue, and I also live on Henry Street.
Cheryl Erickson, and I live upstairs. And this is the first meeting I've come to.
Hi, I'm Dave Cawley. I live on Nash Place, which is also part of the Old East End.
I already did.
Have people online? Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Lex, and I live at 41 Tebow, Ward 1.
Jean?
Hi, I'm Jean. I live on East Ave.
Sophie?
Sophie Quest, Chase Street, Old East End.
And did we get everyone online? I don't see them.
Sarah is next to the picture of me.
Sarah?
Yep, I'm here. Excuse me, off of East Avenue.
Oh, okay.
You can see.
All right, well, again, welcome, and I think we have a few announcements. Jonathan? Oops.
Hi, thank you. I want to announce this. This is really from Scott, but it's about the Community Development Block Grant, the CDBG. And we will be appointing, in the next couple of months, we'll be appointing a member to the Community Development Block Grant Advisory Board. That's, I'm going to say CDBG from now on. The CDBG meets 4 times between January and April, and that will be next year. And the reason for its existence is to decide how the city should allocate funds that come from a HUD block grant. There are 2 HUD block grants that come to the state of Vermont, one for everywhere else and one for Burlington. And Burlington has created this really wonderful community popular structure to allocate funds for the block grants. And what that is it's an advisory board. And on the advisory board, you deliberate over the applications that people have submitted for money from this HUD money and make recommendations. And those recommendations go to city council and to the mayor. But I think in 20 odd years, the recommendations have all been accepted perfectly. So this is a real advisory board that really does advise and creates change. It's the opportunity for your voice to be heard in the way federal monies get spent in the city. So Cindy Cook, I think, is our most recent member of the CDBG advisory board. And I don't see her, but she's around. We can talk to her about what it means to be on the board. If you think you want to do it, think about it. And in the next month or two, we'll probably look for names. We have to make a decision by January 15th, but time passes quickly in the winter. So that's all I really have to say. Thank you. If you have any questions, you can talk to me too.
Do we have, I have an announcement, but do we have other announcements first? Yes.
It's not really an announcement. It's more just taking a couple minutes to, again, introduce myself and say, hi, I am your representative in the Senate, one of your 3 representatives in the Senate. My name is Martine LaRock-Ulick. I'm also on the school board, as I said. I am vice chair, of education, and I'm the clerk of the Health and Welfare Committee. I would love to have a chunk of time if you ever have, a chunk that is open to come and speak to you a little bit more about what's happening in the legislature. There are a lot of exciting things going on, and I would love to tell you what's happening, but also hear from you about what your priorities and concerns are. This summer, I worked on a joint judicial committee that looked at healthcare in prisons. And as among other things, but that was the main focus of that meeting. And I was also on a joint healthcare committee that looked at homelessness and housing just last Wednesday. I'm on a school construction task force, which is really digging into some work right now, very exciting work. And also I'm on a task force that's looking at adult education in the state, as well as the nominating committee for the Green Mountain Care Board. So those are all things that I could talk to you about and would love to unpack some of that. And feel free to ask me questions, grab me before I leave, send me an email. But I'd love to hear from you. Thanks.
Thank you. I have one quick announcement, and that's we have a new support person from CETA. Is this Oscar?
Okay, yeah.
She'll be helping us keep our meetings online and communications open. So are there any other announcements? If not, I'm going to move forward to the next order of business, which is a steering committee nomination. And I think we have a nominee. And who are you going to make that nomination, Carol?
I could.
You can.
We have a great volunteer, Sam Ayat, who would like to serve on the steering committee with Carter and Tom and Jonathan and me. So I move that our NPA meeting tonight support Sam's addition to our steering committee.
Thank you. Can I get by a show of hands? Would you like to say anything? You want to say something?
Background, a little bit of who you.
I'm Samantha, and yes, there's microphones everyone. Samantha Ayat, and I live at 20 Chase Street. And a little bit of background. My partner Joel and I moved from Cleveland almost 2 years ago, and we came here knowing that community was a very important thing in Burlington and Vermont in general. And we have really enjoyed integrating ourselves into the community and into the Ward 1. And we've had a really great mentor in Dave Colley, and working with doing PPN projects and working with the city and DPW on some things already. And it's just been really great getting to know everybody and working with everybody. And I hope that my volunteering will continue to help Ward 1.
All right.
We have a Sophie online.
Sophie, you have a comment?
Oh, yes, she's fantastic, everybody.
Thanks, Sophie.
Yes, to say that.
All right, well, we have a nomination. It's been seconded. Are there any other comments before we have a vote? All right, then could we by show of hands? All those in favor? Raise your hand. And I think I'm not going to count all the hands, but I think most of the hands are up. And so, Sam, congratulations.
Thank you.
Sam's already been helping us a lot, if you don't know, and she's been orchestrating all the food that we serve at the monthly meetings. So she's more than welcome here on the steering committee. All right. The next piece on the agenda is Speak Out. And the first guy who's in the queue here is Enrico. He's going to talk to us a little bit about
The passive house.
Passive
building
house.
standard.
Passive House. So did anyone not get a Passive House handout that would like one?
And you can start.
We just need to be that way.
Rico, you're on.
Again, thank you very much for having us tonight.
Microphone?
Again, my name. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello. Okay, do you hear me? Okay. Thank you very much for having us tonight. Again, my name is Enrique Bueno. I'm on the board of Vermont Passive House. Our mission is a nonprofit organization with our mission of informing the government as well as the public about the benefits of the Vermont Passive House building standard, which is basically summarized. Let me go into presentation mode here. Okay. Which is basically summarized by these 5 principles: air tightness, thermal breach-free construction or design, climate-specific insulation, high-performance windows and doors, and ventilation with high recovery. These are basic concepts to every builder. The only difference is in the targets and the metrics and in the observation of details. So but if properly executed, this can turn into very good results, like the ones that shows this graphic, as is an infrared thermal image of a passive house retrofitted building compared to the existing adjacent buildings. The reds and the yellows are radiating heat from the buildings, and the blues and the greens are cold surfaces. So this is the result of the passive house standard building standard that can be used for new construction as well as retrofit. And there is no other standard in the world that can achieve this high energy efficiency. Sorry. Whoops. Okay. Okay. The passive house building standards go beyond energy efficiency, though. Passive house drive economic and workforce development. Passive house sponsors the diversity, supports diversity, equity, and inclusion by lowest cost of ownership for low-income folks. Passive house buildings are islands of tranquility for living, working, teaching, and healing by improved indoor air quality and protection from external noise pollution, which is very vital in an urban area. Passive house is vital component for buildings electrification from renewable sources. It serves as an innovation hub, and it's also climate action. In terms of innovation hubs and workforce development, these are 3 examples of new business that didn't exist 6 years ago. On the left bottom corner, you see prefabricated wall panels of our company in New York State to retrofit buildings. On the upper corner, you see the wood fiber insulation factory started in 22 in Madison, Maine, that produces wood fiber insulation out of scrap wood, and also compress panels for insulation. And also another prefabricated building components for new construction in Sismore, Maine. So during the first 15 years since the implementation of passive house in Germany 40 years ago, 50 new windows manufacturers were established to build passive house certified windows. So that's a great economic drivers as well as workforce drivers. In terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it provides the lowest energy bills, smallest size mechanical systems, lowest maintenance costs, lowest mechanical replacement cost. These 2 pictures that you see in there are for 2 very similar buildings designed by the same architectural firm in Burlington, Vermont. One is the Wright House that was inaugurated in 2014. And the other one is the Elm Place that was built according to the Passive House started in Milton, Vermont. And according to the Cathedral Square buildings owner, for the performance data, this Passive House uses 40% less energy demand compared to that. And the additional cost to go from this to that was only 2%. Compared to the energy building code, the stretch code that we have in Vermont, this would be 68% less energy for heating and cooling. So this is dramatic difference in terms of energy demand, which it's providing a good way to improve the building code, because at this point we are building new construction that is 70% short from where it should be. And that is a big burden in terms of the electrification process that we want. The challenge to electrify thermal energy requirements is depicted in these statements that over the past 5 years, residents and business in Burlington consume the equivalent to 782 megawatts hours per year just for thermal, space heating, domestic hot water, and cooking from gas supplied by Vermont Gas Service, who supplies 95% of the customers in the city of Burlington. Vermont Electric Department total gross generation purchases and capacity in 22 was 353,461 megawatts hour, and Burlington electric energy use in 22 was 329,609 megawatts hour. This means that Burlington Electric will have to triple their generation capacity just to replace the gas for electricity on top of the additional requirements for EVs and city growth, which makes vital the reduction of thermal loads for a sustainable electrification out of renewables. What do we ask from you? An active participation in raising the bar of energy performance and building code, in demanding increased builders' knowledge, in creating a social inventory with resilient and low maintenance buildings, in creating mechanisms for the adoption and enforcement of an enhanced building code, and for the NPAs to bring the matter to the city council for them to review buildings energy standard within zoning ordinances. 6 cities in Massachusetts, including Boston, led the way through zoning ordinances, and now is a mandatory those 6 cities to require passive house certification for buildings 12,000 square feet and up. The Massachusetts Department of Energy came to the conclusion that only by reducing thermal loads of buildings as achieved by following the passive house building standard would Massachusetts be able to develop and maintain a sustainable electric grid based on renewables. And what is the incremental cost? As I mentioned before, Elm Place in Milton was only 2% increase in incremental cost. And this is consistent with many other projects in Massachusetts that go from 1% to 2.8% for an average of just 2%. And this includes affordable housing for low-income people. This Cambridge Finch that is an affordable housing for low-income people. In terms of incentives, we the Vermont Gas Systems, as well as Efficiency Vermont, for a 30 apartments building, can grant $100,000 of incentive compared to $115,000 in Massachusetts from Vermont. From Mass Save. So from the standpoint of incentives, shouldn't be any restriction on that. The difference is that 5 years ago, both Vermont as well as Massachusetts had only one multifamily passive house building. Today, 5 years later, there are 150 in Massachusetts, but we're still stuck with just one. And that's due to the building code that we have. And the passive house building standard creates buildings that will maintain livable conditions in the event of an extended loss of power or heating capacity by means of reducing energy loads and improving resilience, passive heating and cooling strategies, which is passive survivability, which is becoming more and more critical with our climate change events. Creates durable buildings using such features as rain screens, details based on building signs, windows that are climate specific for energy and comfort, for Vermont must be triple pane, and components that are hydrothermal sound allowing the structure to dry, therefore preventing mold formation and rot. It optimizes the use on-site renewable energy, and it allows the implementation of vernacular design that is specific to a region and a period, allowing the use of local materials and knowledge of to construct buildings without any limitation on architectural design, and can be implemented in any type of building, single family, multifamily, high rise, commercial, hospitals, etc. In terms of the electrification challenge on the left, you see this is the typical curve of a typical building. The area under the curve is the energy through the year for heating and cooling. And on the right, you see the passive building that lowers the loads and flattens that curve, which is very critical when you are talking about renewable energy, because no matter the building, there will still be resource availability mismatch between supply and demand. However, if we flatten or lower buildings' load profiles, that can still dampen the effect. And the ripple effect of efficiency. Efficiency means less generation, less storage, and less transmission capacity, which means that we're going to have to invest less in the transition process. And passive house is climate action, because passive house combined with low embodied carbon materials, with electrifying everything, and with clean energy gives us zero carbon buildings, enabling a sustainable electric grid performance based on renewables. Thank you very much, and I'll entertain any questions that you may have.
Good questions? Lisa with her hand raised. Who has her hand raised? Lisa. Lisa? You're on? Lisa, we can't hear you. You're on mute. All right, we'll get back to Lisa. Are there questions in the room? Yes.
So I haven't, this is the first I've heard of Vermont Passive House. Is that, I mean, are you an advocacy group, or are you?
We are a non-profit organization, yes, that we exist already for 10 years in Vermont. We have been advocating at the State House as well as with professionals in the field, and we are approaching now the assemblies in order to inform you about the passive house, the benefits of the passive house.
How can you become involved to help advocate with you?
You can become a member. You can become part of our board meeting. You can, I mean, we normally run webinars through the year, technical webinars, as well as one-on-one type of webinars. This Vermont Passive House is part of the national or international organization. It started in Germany with the Passive House Institute, and it now in the United States is FUS, which is the Passive House Institute US, to inform what the Passive House standard is. Yes.
Any other questions? Karen?
Are you in contact with Campaign Housing Trust and the other organizations that build affordable housing? Because, you know, they're slated to build, well, they're building more and more units. So that's question number one, and then also the other people, the players in Vermont that are Redstone and et cetera, that are people that are actually putting forward projects, not only in Burlington, but throughout the county and maybe beyond. Because I think those are the people that really need to. And oriented, this was too much information.
I understand that, yeah.
I would really need to understand it and get feedback from people. And I'm not questioning what you're saying, but I validate a lot of what you shared with us.
Yeah.
And I believe there's a lot of truth to it, but I'd like to know more. The city council has committees, and one of them is dealing with energy, et cetera. And so and then there are a couple of city councilors here tonight in the room that potentially you could find an avenue to get more directly to the council, but I applaud you in going to all the NPA. But have you reached out to developers and to Champlain Housing Trust, et cetera?
We have reached out to them. The problem is that Vermont has a very lax building code, and that is preventing really the implementation of a high performance building code, and that has on top of that is not enforced. The building code is not enforced. The legislature is just trying with the first step to do an enforcement, but it's not yet enforced. And there is a great push from the builders because they think that the passive house is more expensive. And
different designations for different buildings within the state, and I know university and other seek to achieve those higher standards.
Yeah. We work together with the designers, the architect firms that design Elm Place in Milton, and now one of the executives of Cathedral Square is now with the Champlain Housing Trust. So everybody's aware of the standard that we have been trying to promote it with all of them. But again, I mean, the problem is that there is a push from the building community that this is not affordable. And as you can see from all these different projects, the difference is minimal, and the benefits are tremendously great. Well, what we can do, I mean, for this NPA or the other works, is to give you a webinar with very basic information so you can digest. I understand this. There's a lot of information in this, but I only had 10 minutes to present, so I can. But we are there to respond to any technical questions that you may have.
If you have the webinar, is that a recording that we could send a link to and people could?
We can record a webinar, and yes.
Okay.
I mean, we can design a webinar specific for you. Okay, or we can give you many links of different webinars where you can understand there is a ton of information out there in webinars. We have presented webinars to Burlington Electric here. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Karen Long. I think this is very timely when we are at a point where they're talking about this making McNeil plant that is already 40 years old generate steam and move it 2 miles up to the campus. I love that there's this thing about wood fiber, because I know that's been brought up at least one time when we were talking to BED about other uses, because they keep saying they're not cutting down trees, they're using the scrap wood. but there's a lot of pollution coming from the McNeil plant, and it is just, I think if we have to generate more steam or more, to push the steam up 2 miles, I think it will just create more pollution. So, and I've never heard BED talk about conserving energy. And I've asked different people, why don't you talk about that? Conserving electricity instead of building more electricity for us. And my understanding is McNeil, it's just doing our electricity for the lights.
It's 30% of the, of,
30% of cities use.
yeah.
So that means 400,000 tons of CO2. I mean, we put 400,000 tons of CO2 in the
I
atmosphere.
think we're gonna talk about McNeil in just a couple
Right,
minutes.
but his presentation, I think, is very timely. Thank you for it.
The big challenge of electrifying everything is that if we don't load the loads, we're going to end generating electricity from burning something, because that's going to be the transition. So it's very important to address that. And unfortunately, the building code in Vermont is not helping in doing that. That's why. And in many other states like Massachusetts before, the ordinances that the different cities made were ahead of the building code. So that's why we're approaching you to see if we can generate some interest from below to above, because we have tried for 10 years now to go from above to below, and it doesn't work. We have done ton of presentations as the State House and to work with the senators and everybody. So, and it's not quick.
Enrico, we're running out of time, but
Sorry.
how about if we do
Looks like
two?
Lisa's raising her
Lisa,
hand.
do you have a quick question?
I was wondering about retrofitting, since a lot of the housing stock in our area is old.
Retrofitting is the biggest challenge that we have. We need to, according to the Energy Action Network, we need to retrofit 90,000 units by 2030. And at this point, we're doing 1,500 a year. So that means that we have to do 9,000 by a year to make it. And this is the best way, because at this point, the proposal of the building code is to reduce or to improve by 20%. But if we're short by 70% and we improve by 20%, we're going to be still 50% short. And 50% short means that we're going to be retrofitting our new buildings the very day that we occupy them, or will need to, in order to make them fossil fuel independent. So that is why this is critical to be addressed.
Enrico, thank you very much. I'm going to do two things. One is work with you to get perhaps a webinar started. We'll put a notice out on Front Porch Forum. People who are interested can dive deep into this subject. And if there's not sufficient interest there, maybe just get a recording of a webinar you've already got. And that way people can sort of listen to it at their leisure. How's that sound? Perfect. All right. Thank you very much.
Be able to collaborate with you in any way you need.
Okay. Are there other speak out issues? Oh my God. You do.
Very, very quickly, non-citizen voting. I've been against that ever since its inception and spoken out against it at city council a couple of times. But because I'm a hypocrite, I went and registered for non-citizen voting, having been in the country for 35 years with a green card. And so that was interesting. But my mole in the city court's office, city clerk's office for your interest says that there's been quite a lot of people signing up for that and registering. So whatever side of the discussion you're on, I thought you might find that interesting, that it does seem to have attracted quite a bit of interest.
All right, thanks. I'm gonna close speak out and move forward into our next item. And that is district heat resolution. All right, and it's not so much a resolution as it is a letter, and I've handed out copies of this to most of the people in the room. And there was a discussion at our last meeting, sort of a casual discussion about district heat and how that worked. There was a few questions raised, and I don't believe that a lot of questions that exist for district heat were answered last time. And so that's what you see in front of you is just a bunch of questions. It doesn't really say that district heat or district energy is good, bad, or ugly. It just says that this is information that we'd like to have, or like city council to have, before any decision is made as to whether to proceed with this type of project. And that's, so there's a few questions here about the life of the McNeil plant and how much energy we're going to use and what the cost will be and who will pay for it and stuff like that. So what I'm asking first is to get some feedback on this. Do people like these questions or not like the questions? Should they be modified? And if we can agree that these are an okay set, I'm asking for your approval to formally send this to city council from our NPA and asking them to gather more information. Yes.
Thanks. I'm just standing here so I can see people. I appreciate the NPA raising this topic. I like these questions. I mean, I think they're useful questions, but I think that the questions here and the discourse that I've seen on Front Porch Forum is missing a major topic. And that topic is just transition, which in another way of saying that is the effects on economic inequality of decisions that we make around, climate change. So the big question that I have in that regard and that I would like to propose adding to this list is, we don't know, is basically if there were a decision to decommission the McNeil plant, what would the effect be on the electric rates in the city? And for some folks, that might not seem like a big issue, but given that we are in the middle of a historic housing crisis, we're already losing lower income folks from living in Burlington. And in addition to being an ethical issue, that is a climate issue of the highest order, because when people can't afford to live here, what do? They move further out and they drive to their jobs, right? So it's actually counterproductive to lose low income people from the city. The more that we can protect the affordability of housing here and the affordability of living here, the better our chances of actually increasing use of public transportation, right? And my understanding is that transportation costs are actually the single biggest driver in Vermont. And maybe I have that wrong, but they're one of the biggest drivers in Vermont of our energy use. So while we're looking at McNeil and there are a lot of people who say that the burning of wood is not perfect, right? That's not the perfect answer. I also really want our community to understand the interdependence of all of these decisions, not only with regard to what gets emitted, but with regard to how it affects other people, and then the choices that they have or don't have, right? So I just feel like there's a whole piece of the conversation that I haven't been hearing yet that is really critical for everyone who cares about this to process together. And I think a great step to that would be to add a question to this list around what the effect would be on electric rates either way.
Also, the question of the health of children in the Old North End and the rates of COPD among teenagers and asthma among young children. So BED at some point put filters into those stacks. And it did away with a lot of the high numbers of people, but the ages of the people that it is now affecting went way down, meaning we're affecting the children of the Old North End, which again are your low-income kids. And I think that we need to say that loud and clear, and we need to get the city council and who is ever making these decisions to look at at those numbers, and they're from the health department, the state health department.
Okay. Carter?
Yeah, I agree with Kathy and Julia, and I appreciate both raising it. I think it's probably good information for this resolution to see how this decision would impact energy rates either way. I mean, I think the flip side of that I would also want to include in that piece is right now McNeil, well, one, we're just talking about expanding it versus keeping it where it is. So I think that's one thing that in some of the conversation, not saying that you're saying this, Julia, but in general, like I feel like we're falling into a debate of McNeil good or bad, but it's really like, are we expanding this thing and what are the benefits or drawbacks of expanding it versus keeping it as is? And then the other piece, though, to your point, if the next logical conversation is really like, is this part of our long-term energy future? And right now, McNeil is only operational because it's heavily subsidized and BED is making money off of trading renewable energy credits in the New England market. And many states are moving to eliminate subsidies for wood. So Vermont hasn't to this point, but that's the trend. And so if that gets eliminated, the McNeil plant is completely economically not viable. And to a drastic extent. And so that if that's the case, not saying that means we should subsidize a high carbon fuel, but we need to be prepared as a community to make up that difference regardless, in my view, because that's where energy policy is heading. But yeah, I appreciate you raising the I think having the economic piece and the health piece up front is really crucial, because we can't save the planet on the back of driving out everybody who doesn't have a lot of money, in my view.
Any other comments?
Turn the mic on.
A lot of detail about the steel plant and what it does. And what it's not.
One of the advantages of the passive house building standard is the ventilation system that you have. It's requirement. It's a balanced ventilation. So you have fresh filtered air coming from the outside and stale air going to the outside permanently 24/7. So that's one of the biggest improvements for people that have asthma or respiratory problems, because you have clean air to breathe. At this point, our buildings have no ventilation because the concept is that we're having ventilations through the cracks, and cracks don't provide good ventilation. So that is one of the biggest, to me, benefits of the passive house standards.
Yeah.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Cheryl Green, and my question is that I have read that the mayor has said we're at a point of either vote this up or vote it down. And so I'm wondering about more and more questions. And maybe city councilors Tim Zariah, Melo could talk to that point. Is the city really willing to entertain more questions, or are we at a vote it up or vote it down? And when do we think it's going to be in front of the city council for that vote?
I would like to add a piece. I think that's a good question, but in addition, what is the city council's role with regard to BED? BED is an enterprise organization that comes under the city's umbrella. Does that mean that city council has to authorize all its actions like this?
Yes. Not all, but yes, in this case, the city council would have to authorize it. So it is a true yes or no vote, not just a symbolic one.
Okay, but now your question, so.
Yes. So hi. So is there time for more questions?
I think there's a time for more questions. I know that I still have questions. And my understanding is that it's been delayed because of questions. So it was supposed to come to the city council, I think, first in September, and then at our meeting yesterday, and it hasn't. My understanding is from Karen's emails that it was because there were more questions. So I think the time for questions is now. And yeah. And I'm not sure when it's coming. We only heard that it wasn't coming to the meeting yesterday. We didn't hear when it would come. So I don't think that we know when it's coming back, but I would assume they're trying to do it sooner rather than later. And the sooner we get the questions, the better, probably.
Catherine Block. First, would like to thank you for the excellent questions. And there's one thing that should be added that was already mentioned about the health effects, but they can say that the air is filtered and scrubbed, but the smallest particles cannot be filtered out. And those are the ones that are most dangerous in causing lung disease. So there should be a question about that.
Okay, we got a question here.
Okay, Peter Lukowski, and I want to address the issue number 3 about the trees being cut down and so forth. And Darren Springer, the other last time we were here, told us that what's being burned is not the logs, but the branches and so forth and the debris. There are a couple of aspects to that. For one thing, if the loggers are able to sell all of those branches and so forth, it makes the whole operation cheaper for them. And it basically is encouraging cutting more trees down overall. Just the balance is going to be that more trees will be cut. And the effect of that, of course, would have to be calculated out. But there's another more physical and simple question. All of those branches and twigs and whatever are still holding carbon. And they take a long time to rot. Sure enough, it doesn't, they're not doing like a live tree, but they're still not in the atmosphere. And they can be there for a long time. And that could even be extended by piling them up and putting dirt on top of them or something like that, so that they would actually be sequestering carbon right there on the spot in the woods, instead of being hauled off here and being burned. I think that is just another example of the backwardness of this, of burning, because if they get hauled over here and put in the wood chip plant, they don't have a decade or 2 decades or 3, depending on what you do with them, to rot and go into the atmosphere. Ultimately, they're just poof, up they go, up the smokestack instantly. So it's all a matter of rates of flow and the rate of change and the rate of regeneration and so forth. And that isn't being addressed at all, that aspect of it. What would happen to that quote waste wood? The other issue, another issue, and there's no particular issue on here that addresses this, and that is the fact that one of the factors in making this economically possible is the sale of carbon credits. And what that amounts to is burning down trees and to make electricity, which to my mind is really not green energy, but calling it green energy, calling it something that is doing good for the planet, and then selling that, enabling somebody else to do something which is outright polluting. I'd like to know a lot more about that. Something that doesn't really help us except over 100 years spans when the trees finally grow back, and it's too late already, and then letting somebody else do something that's putting a lot of carbon somewhere. Darren said it was all in New England and so forth, and he talked real fast and I didn't catch it. I'd like to have another whole question here about the carbon credit aspect of it and have it broken down into real, what else will happen if we do this? What will we be enabling that's even worse?
Jonathan?
Yeah, this is really a point of clarification. And to Cheryl, to your answer. The point, if I understand this correctly, the point of this letter or this resolution is to recommend the city council oppose this unless they have satisfactory answers to these questions. Is that right? So we're saying, unless you can answer all these questions, unless all these questions were answered to your satisfaction, we oppose this. So there is an opinion here, and without the answers, we're at no. Is that correct?
Mostly correct.
Okay.
Sort of wishy-washy here maybe, but the idea was to get the information out so that we, the public, can communicate to our city councils whether this is something that we think is on a good idea or a bad idea, and have information to back it up to say, well, I like it because it does X, or I don't like it because it's going to do Y, or what have you. And maybe what we need to do is invite somebody from BED, give them these questions, plus the ones that were mentioned earlier that are not here, and include them. And say, can you answer these?
Okay, I'm not sure we have a timeline for that, but
part of it depends on when city council's going to.
Right. As long as it's delayed. But maybe to move this forward, seems like there were two questions. I mean, there was a health question. There was what's the cost in the credits question, and there was a real, what's the real changing cost associated with this, which I think may be partially already in there.
Yeah.
Do we want to just say that we'll add those as an amendment to this? We can we can frame the words right now, or we can say we'll add them and then try to pass something just to move this forward. I mean, there's time for more conversation, but as a
question that we can add, we can do it now, but we're already behind schedule. Do we want to do this right now?
With the addition of the two questions that were phrased, that one, I've got somebody tangled. Anyways, I move that we move this forward because the intent was to have the Burlington City Council have answers to these questions before they acted. I don't think there's time for this to come back to us and then go back to the city council. But I would like the addition of the health question and the other question regarding the rate cost added. I believe that we can entrust the two proposers to bring that language to Tom tonight or in a timely fashion so that this can move forward. If the rest of the people are satisfied with that and don't want to actually see the actual verbiage and just generically accept that, I think we could move on this. So that's what I'm proposing. I'm proposing to move on this with the addition of those two topics added as presented tonight to this list of questions, and that I propose that we support this.
So you have, that's your motion.
Yes, that's my motion.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
That is my question. What is this enabling?
If you send me the question, I will add it.
Good.
Okay, so you will add more, but
I will add more questions.
for discussion, can I just, I would like to know when we'll see the details of this project. Because they haven't been disclosed. Most of these questions can't be answered yet, whether by city council or in public. Because they've been hiding a lot of the, I mean, not hiding, but it's, they're saying it's proprietary information. So there's no details of this project that's really publicly available to answer.
I don't know. I don't know what the timeline is, and it sounds like city council is push the date back, but it may only be pushed back a week or a couple weeks. I don't know.
Well, not for the vote, but when we, the public, can see the details of the proposed project. Because those details, there's several in those details, and we haven't seen those. They're saying it's proprietary, they can't disclose it because there's only one customer. I mean, because they're in negotiations with the customer. However, there's only one customer. There's one medical term. And so I don't understand why this information can't be divulged. We've asked a lot of questions with some technical details.
I think what we can do tonight is what Sharon recommended, and that's to take the questions that came out in addition to the ones that are already on the page and send a letter to city council and copy BED on it and say, these are things that we want, but we're really addressing it to city council to say, we want you to make sure you are armed with answers so you can make a good decision.
Their next meeting is the 23rd, not next Monday, but it's the following Monday. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I got a couple days to do it.
You do, but you need to, yeah. I know, I make sure we don't.
Okay. Is it so? This. Yes. Go ahead.
Is it your sense that DED has the capacity themselves to answer the question, the expertise of the DED, or will this take from the additional consultant work?
I don't know the answer. I think BED is very earnestly trying to get this passed.
Yeah.
This is a big deal for them. They really want it. My only concern is trying to get some more information so that I can inform my city councilors how I feel about it.
Possible to have a strong vote based on what we know and what we believe now in the room.
This is let's close out this one issue. Any other discussion? Then can I show hands of who says yes? And who says no, you're not authorized? It looks like the authorized have it. And so I will make those changes and I will also post it on Front Porch Forum. Hopefully some of you saw it there. And so you'll see how those additions have been made and make sure it's out there for a day or two before I actually send it. But we do have another. If we were all city councilors today, which way would we lean? Are we leaning towards putting this, Dave?
After the last two meetings talking about this, it seems to me there's two issues on the table that I've heard. The one is, should we have a wood-fired burning plant that's generating electricity? That's what a lot of criticism has come out that I hear in this room is about McNeil. The second thing is whether there should be a district energy project. So if you're talking about taking a straw poll, then let's be clear what we're trying to take a straw poll about. Because what the city council is considering is just the district energy project, not whether to shut down the McNeil plant. However, whatever you feel about burning the wood, that has to do with the McNeil plant. The district energy project is going to reduce carbon by 16%. It's one of the biggest things that Burlington can do to reduce carbon emissions. That's what BED says. And to the point about answering questions, as I said earlier, go to the BED website. They have a lot of Q&A about this project. And that I don't feel many people have gone to this to actually look at the detail that's expressed there.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that. People should definitely do their homework on this because it's very complicated. I think the debate from or the thing that I'm wrestling with, and I think a lot of folks are wrestling with, is does this actually reduce carbon by the amount that BED is claiming? There's a for BED, both on the having McNeil exist and also on the district energy project. And, you know, Darren's argument, as I've heard it in different forums that we've talked about this, is, you know, we're not going to increase the amount of wood because we're going to offset what we're burning in other areas and we're going to come out even. So it's not really a question of burning more wood. At least that's, I'm paraphrasing, and that's how I've heard it. I might be wrong. Don't want to speak for anybody as I do it. But my understanding as it's written, and other folks know more than me here, this change would allow them, give them the legal authority to burn more wood. I think it's up to 7 or 8%. So then the question, you know, it is a district energy project, but the heat coming from McNeil, in theory, the increased amount of wood burning is what's going to fuel this efficiency. So then it's a question of, is burning gas or burning wood, like you're picking your poison a little bit, or like, does this fit in? Does this actually get us 20 years down the line to our energy goals? So I just think it's important to note that, like, while I'm not questioning anybody's intentions, there are financial incentives for utilities to take positions on different things. And Vermont utilities are some of the best in the country when it comes to green energy, and are flawed like every other institution and every other utility in the country. So I just think that, like, yes, BED, you should go hear what they have to say, and not to plug my work, but 350 Vermont, a number of other advocacy organizations, folks who, I mean, folks should definitely check out the symposium that the 2 committee of the city council did on this. There's an IPCC or IPCC climate scientist, among other academics from New England, speaking specifically to this project and the true impacts versus, and they were going back and forth with Darren directly and other folks from BED. So I just want to throw that out there. Yeah.
Somebody that served on the city council, and when I even came to the city council early on, district energy was a topic. And it was something that we all wanted, and we could never afford it. We could never wrap our arms around it. We finally got a partner, and I was overjoyed. Now, sometimes there is a moment in time where something makes sense, and then time evolves, time passes, and then you learn more and you realize that maybe what you thought made total sense isn't as well-founded. That's a very sad moment in my life. And so I'll do a straw vote tonight, but I couldn't be held to that because I am wavering so much, because I feel like every time I think I know enough, I don't know enough about this topic. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that for me, this is a gut-wrenching vote because I thought this was the right thing to do. And now I'm not sure at all. Thank you.
Well, I think to conclude this discussion, we're going to have a simple straw vote on whether people think that district energy is a good idea or not. We're not going to talk about whether burning wood is a good idea or whether McNeil should be extended or not. So we're just going to have a simple just the idea of district energy.
Can we make it clear that this is not the district energy that Eric was talking about? What used to be was considered district energy, what we all wanted was to use the waste heat that goes into the already been used to generate electricity with the turbine. That was going to go as hot water to the old North End and heat buildings. That was a whole completely different thing. Now this is using just plain, which would otherwise be used to generate electricity. The waste heat, the hot water, is off the table again. It's a totally different thing. So any emotional attachment we have to district energy is good old days when it was hot water. No, it's not the same project. It's not district energy in the old sense. It's a new meaning for the same term. So let's keep that clear, that if you love the old, we're gonna have a straw vote.
Yeah, I was just gonna.
Maybe we don't need a straw vote.
A little bit too nuanced, and as Sharon said, the fact that we have this almost 2-page list of questions that we don't have answered yet, that I personally don't feel comfortable to say yes or no. It's in that kind of middle thing where I don't have enough information to have a clear vote. And I also don't know if this vote isn't really going to mean anything except for just showing what everybody is currently feeling. You should all run for city council.
Yes.
I was just gonna say that energy is a good idea, but geothermal is energy. And that we should be, if we're gonna do the straw vote, to just say that it's the proposal for the McNeil District Energy.
I don't think we're going to do a straw vote.
Okay, but the other thing is, we don't know for sure that the hospital is even going to agree to buy this energy. So that gives you.
Or the universe.
Here.
Well, we're gonna end this discussion right now.
That is a great point. And as a city councilor with the frequent delays, that makes me wonder, is the hospital really committed, right? Thank you.
I appreciate all the comments we've gotten. It seems like this is a fairly Interesting subject, but in the spirit of time, we're moving on and we're running way behind. But it is city councilor time. So, Zariah. Tim?
Tim, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm happy to go. I apologize in advance. Last night's city council meeting went from 5:30 until, what was it, Councilor Grant? It was 12:30. So I am fairly ragged. And I'll just give you a quick overview of what we covered last night and hopefully to take some questions on it. The sort of theme, if there was one, if there is one on city council meetings last night, was the public safety question. We entertained several presentations. That is, symbolic of how I feel. We had several presentations, and I took a couple of important votes. We received a really interesting presentation from Deputy Chief Brian Labarge and two other senior members of the Burlington Police Department, one of whom runs the narcotics unit, on the narcotics unit's work in the city. Deputy Chief Labarge, when I first met him, was a newly minted narcotics detective, which made me feel very, very old that now he's deputy chief. They provided a lot of interesting information, including explaining on a high level the way narcotics interdiction works in the city. I think one of the important takeaways for me that they emphasized was that the Burlington Police Department, because of its current size, no longer has a street crimes unit, which is a really critical part of the police department's infrastructure, and has a relationship to both how the narcotics unit works, but also how sort of more mundane auto theft, burglaries are investigated or are not investigated. So that was interesting. They are trying to build that unit. They're trying to build capacity and hopefully get that unit stood up and back online. Like I said, I really recommend it. It was really interesting. They emphasized how many officers are necessary to do, safe, effective drug interdiction investigations in a way that a responsible prosecutor would take and that would stand up in court. Really labor intensive process and really interesting to hear. I felt hopeful and encouraged after that presentation, although obviously the challenges associated with the size of the police department and the drug problem are significant. Also both hopeful and worrisome. We had a equally interesting presentation by the chief of the fire department and another member of the fire department on a pilot initiative that the fire department is putting forward, and we voted on that. It was an initiative that interestingly arose from ideas that members of the fire department themselves had on how to better triage in response to certain categories of overdose emergencies. As I'm sure you all know, and if you don't, you should. Once again, we are on a record pace with respect to overdose emergencies in the city. It looks like we are going to considerably outstrip last year. And as the fire department explained to us and has explained to us repeatedly, that is putting a strain on their resources beyond anything that they've ever experienced. It is really remarkable, the work and the pressure that they're under. In a nutshell, their idea was that they would staff a triage truck that has what they believe is the right
amount of equipment to respond to these types of emergencies, but is not as intensive as what they do now, which is sending the ambulance out and then usually like one of the engines out. They think that that will conserve resources, make them more effective, and notably is going to be, the idea is that it's going to be staffed by fire department personnel who are working overtime shifts. So people in the fire department who have already done their full capacity for the week and are taking voluntarily on extra hours to do this. I found it inspiring and hopeful on multiple levels. One, that our fire department and the folks that are in it are so engaged and coming up with creative ideas, driven by necessity and driven by the crisis. I found it incredibly moving, frankly, that men and women who are obviously working so incredibly hard right now would be willing to take on an extra task because they think it would be good for the city and help the responses. So, you know, a lot of positivity, tempered by the fact that the need for this is driven by this incredible crisis. Similarly, we voted on approving a 30-bed, temporary 30-bed warming shelter. This is something that the city has stood up many years running now. It's going to go from December through March. It passed almost unanimously. There was concern raised, which I share, about the capacity of the downtown business district to absorb more services of this kind, given the state of chaos and disorder that they're presently experiencing downtown already. I share those concerns. I worry about those concerns, but on balance, I think that this was necessary and the best option. You know, we can't. We have an ability to do something that prevents people from dying of exposure deaths. We have to do that, and you know, it seems like the administration is thinking through the public safety ramifications of it, and I hope that it proves effective in a way that I think our other low barrier shelters are proving on balance, not without difficulties. And then finally, which I think took a good deal of the evening, we approved a public safety resolution. Councillor Grant and I and President Paul are on the Public Safety Committee. Councillor Grant, President Paul did a tremendous amount of work on this resolution that does a number of things. I'm happy to take questions about it. I view it as a sort of as an important first step in addressing our public health and public safety crisis. There will be more to come, including a number of public forums on the issue of public safety. We're seeking data from stakeholders. We have made requests vocally. Councillor Grant in particular has been a tremendous advocate of this, and I agree with her that we need to be pressuring Montpelier for resources that the city needs and deserves, frankly. And so I think it's an important step forward. We heard a tremendous outpouring. It was an incredibly lengthy public forum. We heard a tremendous outpouring of concern, worry, fear, anger from folks in the community, you know, in light of the public safety situation. That is something that I and I know the other councilors, you know, hear about, you know, on at least a 10-to-1 basis over every other issue. And so we're really facing a critical inflection point on public safety. I know you invited Councillor Grant here today to talk more about that, so I won't go on and on about that. Those were our high points. If feel compelled to just mention I've told a number of folks here this, but for those of you who don't know, during our last NPA meeting, Zariah and I both expressed that we were undecided on the district energy idea or the proposal. I still am, but since that time have also concluded that I need to recuse myself based on a professional conflict of interest. This is an important issue. It's an important vote. You should know that the decision to recuse myself was not one that I took lightly and not one that I made by myself. I consulted the appropriate professional resources. But I don't have a choice. I have to recuse myself. So still, I don't think recusing myself doesn't mean that I can't listen to the discussion and help you get more information, but I won't be voting on the question. So that's it that I can think of, and I apologize for not being more organized. Like I said, I am. I don't know how you're feeling, Councilor Grant, but I'm. For that and many other reasons, you are a better city councilor than I am. I am not on my fifth wind. I am exhausted.
Sorry, you want to add to this?
Yeah, I don't have too many additional things. I think to the district energy debate, I'll just add, since everybody else has weighed in, I do think Sharon's point was good. Like what we thought was a good idea doesn't always necessarily be like the Parkway. I'm sure at some point was a really good idea, and in 2020 maybe it wasn't. And I think district energy, it's hard to, and I do think like the distinction of like McNeil, like I don't, as much as I don't know, this is information I don't need to give away, but I guess I'll give it away. I don't necessarily advocate for shutting down the McNeil plant right now. I think my questions are still, which weren't, it's like how much where, which I think we can't answer. I think we won't get the answer essentially until we do this vote, like how much we're committing to how long McNeil will be operating with like in order to get a return on investment of tearing up all of the streets and doing all of the things, because we don't know all of the price points, we don't know all of the things. And for me, if it's a like 5-year investment until that makes sense, that's a very different question than if it's a 40-year investment until that makes sense. And I just don't know that we'll have the answer to that by the time we're asked to vote. The other thing that I haven't been able to get an answer to that I do think is really important, even the city does not decide how those $42 million are spent, right? Like those are not money that the city has that we get to spend on something else instead. But it still matters to me what $42 million could do in terms of decarbonizing Burlington. Just because some of it is public money, some of it is money that's coming from Leahy's office. But what used to be Leahy's office in terms of it. So like when we're, so, and some of it's private or some of it is still like conceptual in terms of where it's coming from. And so I think it does matter, is this actually a good like per carbon like reduction investment in terms of, okay, we're trying to mostly use waste things, but one, how long are we doing that? And then two, could we be doing like a much better energy transition with $42 million in a different way? Not that we have the authority how to spend to say how we would spend those $42 million, but I still think I think that's an important part of it. Thermal energy is in front, for those who care about district energy, thermal energy is also in front of the city council, which is being heard again on the 16th. I think the meeting moved up to 5 o'clock. And the question, so there were two questions that were put forth to voters. One was the charter change, which was passed in the legislature with a caveat. And then the second question was, I don't even remember. I did not stay up until 12:30, but I'm also tired. So there was another question, but right now we've basically got two questions in front of the ordinance committee, which is, do we pass the tax on fossil fuels, a carbon tax on fossil fuels in new buildings of a certain size? And then the second question, which came out of that, is do we regulate forms of renewable energy that might be incentivized, but also have a large carbon footprint? So it's a very similar debate to the McNeil plan. based on the fact that with us regulating fossil fuels, we might be pushing more folks to using high carbon renewable energy. Okay. The other thing that is that I assume Megan's on the agenda, so we don't need to talk about middle income, you're not, yeah, no, we're on the agenda. Okay, great. So. Happening in the South End, so we did know about that. There's a bunch of
Stuff on the city website about South End allowed and what is passing through the city council, which is part of this that Megan will, I assume, talk to later. I'm mostly just looking through my calendar, see what meetings are coming up. Oh, and then obviously the public safety question, which I think Mila will speak to. So I don't think that I need to say a lot of other things because you've got experts in the room who are going to talk about it as soon as Tim and I stop talking. So
I've already stopped.
We've got any short questions for our counselors? Aaron?
Oh, one more, sorry, just because Karen's coming up and that reminds me of two things. One. Not related to Karen, but another thing is, which
I wasn't in the executive session yesterday, so I feel like I know that I'm not breaking executive session. But because I got a voicemail from the National Guard on the lease agreement extension. So that's public knowledge enough that somebody called me about it in a non-confidential thing to talk about that the National Guard is asking for a lease extension on the airport. So I don't know if that's common knowledge, but it is now. And then the other thing is I'm going to try scheduling with some of the continuously problematic units that we have in Ward 1, also in other parts of the city, but obviously for me, primarily in Ward 1. So I'm trying to have that with Bill Ward and DPW. And if folks are interested in that, feel free to shoot me. Or if you just have specific questions or specific or properties that you want me to ask about. That some of the houses or some of the properties that we're talking about are currently in legislation or are currently in court cases. So that makes it more difficult. Can't necessarily address all of those, but a lot of them are not. And so I think just having a systemic approach for that. And then also I think planning ahead for now for how we're going to ticket waste for move out day next spring. And that we've got a plan for that so that we don't have weeks and weeks of waste on the curbs after students move out, and making sure that we're getting the property owners for that. If they're not making plans with their tenants on how to handle that, will be good. That is all.
The FW building, my understanding. And I guess my question is when I don't even know. Well, I remember that Brian Pine was one of the people and the mayor really selling the TIF funding for the downtown. And that they told us that to pay back the money we were borrowing for this TIF, we were going to get increased taxes because VFW building and the old YMCA were going to be redeveloped and bring in a ton of money, just like City Place was going to bring a ton of money into the city. But I mean, along with me being appalled at some of our residential units in Burlington, that we continue to let them be in business. Why have we let the YMCA become like it is? I mean, broken windows, the graffiti, the old YMCA right in our center of downtown. I just don't understand after I've lived here, 40 years, why our city has let that happen to a major building like that in our downtown. And again, that promise of why we should all vote for TIF, which I was totally against, because it takes money from our school systems. The whole education of the state is, funded, takes money from everybody, but we're not going to be getting more taxes from VFW if we're turning that into a homeless shelter, and we're not going to get any money from,
Well, I can address a couple of those. The VFW building is being redeveloped. This shelter is temporary. It's a temporary shelter going from December 15th to March 15th. And when I actually called the mayor about the plan for the shelter, he reminded me, I didn't know, that there is a plan to, I don't know if they're going to tear the building down entirely, but redevelop that building. That redevelopment is apparently not happening until the spring, at which point this temporary inclement weather, no barrier shelter, low barrier shelter will no longer be operational. With respect to the why, this has been a hot topic in the Ward 8 NPA meetings, which I also attend. The old YMCA building, just as a reminder, is not owned by the city. And as I understand it, there are plans in the works for development. They're still pretty early, but I think that there is reason to be hopeful that there's movement on that. But that is in the hands of private folks. I agree with you that it is really problematic. We did talk. Right. Well, I'll leave it at that.
I think that can you grab here?
I always think I can project, but I do think that the development plans for the former YMCA were recently approved, actually. So I think to your good question, there were a lot of reasons, some that had to do with just the owner's ability to kind of get a project together for that site. But that project has now been approved by the city.
That's great news.
Thank you. I just wanted to add with regards to that project. So the old building was sold. There were plans to do a boutique hotel. We had a pandemic. As we all know, a whole bunch of development construction was canceled, put on hold. The people who bought the building after coming out of the pandemic said, we are not going to do this anymore, that this isn't financially feasible. So the building got sold again. And to what was just announced, they have been in town. In fact, one of the representatives of this they're a smaller hotel chain, was actually in Burlington at one of the mayor's coffees. And I looked at him, I said, do you have the financing? And he said, yes. So big smile, right? Because that's been an issue for a lot of the projects. We're coming out of pandemic. We've had a lot of blight. And with the situation with the unhoused, they're going where they don't think they'll be bothered. And unfortunately, because the construction hasn't started and you don't have that activity, it draws people who use it for shelter. Thank you.
Okay.
Wait, sorry, one more, if I can just add one more thing on that point in terms of the TIF district and the land value, because I do think that we've had this in a few, I'll try to keep it short. Okay, so for properties where there's no, whether it's the pit or whether it's, there's not, so I know that Karen worked really hard, I feel like a year ago, Karen Paul, on a resolution to have some kind of like minimum, like you at least have to put like firefighter notices. It wasn't very ambitious because I think there wasn't a whole lot we could do in terms of accountability. I think the best proposal that I've heard in terms of like not letting buildings just fall into disrepair and do nothing with them, which is different than the like housing issue when people are living in it, is just changing our tax system, which we can't do as a city, we have to do as a state, right? So that it's about the land that you're occupying and what the potential use is, as opposed to our current system, which is about what the current use is, which is an abandoned building, doesn't have a whole lot of tax liability on it, right? So you're like, oh, I can just sit on this for a while, pay those low taxes until it's more economical for me to do something, as opposed to trying to get something out of that building. I know there's movement to try to do something about that. I have no idea how successful that is or isn't going to be, but I think that's the only discussion I've heard to fix that at like a systemic level.
Quick question. are we tax where they tax land based on the value that could be generated? Strategy in Washington DC to eliminate the light of gas stations that become abandoned. That could be valuable land and taxed quite nicely. However, when it's sit unused, that tax has to be collected and can speed things up. But there are some tax schemes that are clever. I would just advise falling into the trap of maybe one single tax to rule them all, which is what maybe some classic Georgians would argue for. It's an interesting thing to look into, though.
And I also don't know, because I think in a Vermont, this is and I'm an economist. I'm so sorry. I don't know that it makes sense on like a Vermont state level, because to some extent, like we like to Act 250, we use a lot of like use value to like keep conservation, keep things the way they are. I don't think that makes sense on a city level where you don't necessarily want those same outcomes. But yeah.
Sure.
Sure. Councilors, thank you very much. And Gary, you're up for a brief school update.
Very brief. Hi, Gary Golden. I'm the East District School Commissioner. Just want to just to speak quickly about the reconstruction of the high school is continuing. We have hit some rough spots. We were delayed in getting the deconstruction started because of the lawsuits, 2 lawsuits Monsanto, ours from the district, and then the group of teachers who came forward. Monsanto needed to be involved in reviewing the property. That has pushed us the last part of the construction into winter. So construction costs are higher because wages are higher, scarcity workers. And so we were hit with a $20 million adjustment the last part of the summer because of those costs. We've been operating at a guaranteed maximum pricing. And the third of those, as I said, came in 20 million higher than the experts had thought. So we are still within our budget. The state money has sort of saved us. We're not planning on using any of that. Being a contingency, we've had to draw on that to cover that change in the cost. Things are moving along. We're still in good shape as far as money that's spared. The other part I wanted to speak of are the other initiatives at the school district is participating in our literacy program. If you saw the 7 days article a week or so ago, we didn't get fair shakes in that. We felt like we were really pioneering some research-based reading instruction changes that other school districts didn't know. The other is extensive anti-racism training has stepped up. Last year was mostly for the middle school and high school staff. Now that the initial training for the reading instructions is complete, the entire school district is going through those trainings. Rather than taking questions, because we are behind, if you want to do a quick search on Front Porch Forum for my past articles, Gary Golden, you'll find all my contact information there. I was on the phone with Carter for a little while last night talking. I really enjoyed that. So please give me a call or email me. I'll call you back at a time that's convenient and I can answer any questions you want.
Gary, thank you very much. We're moving ahead with neighborhood code.
Great. Am I close enough to this? All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm with the Office of City Planning here with Megan, just giving a very quick, brief overview of the Burlington Neighborhood Code, which I am sure several of you have heard about, but here to give a little bit more in-depth information. So the Burlington Neighborhood Code is all about how we build on the strength of the city's neighborhoods, plural, evaluate the city's zoning tools to regulate new homes in these areas today and identify opportunities for new neighborhood scale housing citywide. This focuses on housing types such as duplexes, townhouses, fourplexes, all along this spectrum that you can see up here. And this will help us implement the city's plan for how we use the city's limited land area in the future as part of the city's comprehensive plan. So most of the city's zoning changes recently have focused on areas in this gold, areas that are planned for the most intensive future growth. However, not all areas in this gold can or will accommodate new housing. These are also areas that are planned for future jobs or business growth. And while we have we've been successful in adding 1,300 new homes across the city over the last decade, the vast majority have been in new apartments and developments. And we know that these locations don't necessarily meet all housing needs. So the neighborhood code is essentially about the areas of the city that are in blue on the right, the 40% of the cities in our residential area, and how they can also be a place that will allow for new and different types of houses.
Sorry, can I ask one question before you go to the next slide? Of the planning to conserve 40% of the city land area, is that what is currently conserved, or is there any change from what is now?
For the conservation, the neighborhood is going to focus on the blue sustain.
Yeah, the 40% is primarily existing parks and the Intervale, other open spaces that are today.
Thanks, Megan. So in our neighborhoods, we all agree that these neighborhoods can and should be places that support the current and future needs of households across Burlington, make tangible efforts to address the climate emergency, and help us respond to our chronic and emerging housing challenges. So the neighborhood code is about how neighborhoods can evolve in an incremental way in order to meet these. And so this increase in housing opportunities, scale solutions allows for a ton of different opportunities that require less land per home, better utilizing the existing city infrastructure, expand the tax base, share that tax burden, and also allow for opportunities for multi-generational housing and aging in place. We have a very strong partnership with AARP in support of this project, which we'll talk a little bit about at the end. And this will also help us complete Act of 2023, which introduces new statewide requirements for duplex, triplex, and 4-unit buildings. So these are a couple of the housing types that we're talking about. They range from single-family homes with backlot buildings, duplexes, fourplexes, cottage courts, as well as townhouses. And though you might see some of these examples across the city in different neighborhoods, the majority of these are not legal to build today in most of the city's residential districts, as you can see up here. So there are several reasons why this is, but we'll quickly run through a couple. So some of the current residential low density neighborhoods are in some ways miszoned, with many properties not conforming to today's density sizes or density maximum or lot sizes. And some of the neighborhood characteristics in low density neighborhoods actually align closer to high density neighborhoods. Some standards they effectively prohibit what the code might seem to allow. Duplexes are a good example, where in low density residential zones, they're required to be built on 10,000 square foot lots, but the average size of most residential lots in Burlington is just below 8,000 square feet. Some standards don't relate to the perceived scale of the neighborhood. So density standards can lead to a lot of this nonconformity. And an example of these 4 houses from the street level feel very comparable in size. However, these range drastically in density, with the 2 on the right actually not conforming to the 20-unit requirement. We have limits to future housing opportunities. So these are an example with more details on the back of the flyer that was passed out to you. These are some different test fits for what different missing middle housing types could look like. So for example, this cottage court is not would not be allowed to be built in most neighborhoods in Burlington, for one reason being most lots are too small to utilize the PUD standards that would allow it to develop into a condo or rental community. And this fourplex that would be along North Avenue would be prohibited because freestanding units are not allowed in most RL zones. So this code would enable these previously prohibited housing types and enable up to 4 units citywide, providing greater flexibility in older walkable neighborhoods and also along major corridors. With these current recommendations, kind of achieving this by allowing for smaller minimum lot sizes, rear setbacks, and higher lot coverage limits, placing density limits with standards that instead guide building mass, and offering creative solutions for home ownership by creating new lots for infill and other such forms of ownership, and standards that guide the creation of smaller structures such as cottage courts and townhomes. And one of the big reasons I want to come here today and talk to you is to invite you to not only attend the joint committee process that we're going through, and also invite you to other we're hosting different coffee chats that are coming up, and we will be at all other NPA meetings throughout October. We have a likely virtual community meeting happening in November as well, with a very comprehensive website with more information, a pretty in-depth report, I'd say, kind of with the rationale behind this, and also opportunities for online public engagement.
And just for a quick note, Sarah mentioned the joint committee that of our city planning commission, and the member Power is on that committee, and Andy Montrell, who is the chair of the planning commission, is here as well. I don't know, Andy, if you wanted to say anything. Okay, Andy's I think trying to respect all of your time. So yeah, great. Right. So really just want to make sure that this work is on everyone's radar and invite you to learn more about it, share your feedback with the joint committee and with our department. And hopefully we'll get to see you at one of these upcoming events to talk with you more about this project. Sure. Will you allow it? Okay.
So my quick question is not to answer tonight, but as you enlarge the footprint on lots, how are we dealing with runoff, and how that, so that, you know, we always worried about the amount of parking and how that would create more runoff and how that would impact the lake. And I hadn't thought about that, but I've been trying to think about this and ask questions ahead of and give you an opportunity to think about it. Plus, as you expand the preservation of trees, we don't have anything that really talks about that, and trees are our lungs, and I really worry about that. And I'm a constant annoyance to the DRB and to you also, to the Planning Commission, because I really do care about this, and I want to do it right. I think a lot of what you're presenting makes sense, but there are some questions that I feel haven't even surfaced yet. And I'm hoping more people will think about those questions and forward them to you in advance of all these meetings so that the joint committee can consider them and the department can also. Thank you.
Yeah, great. And I second that. Please send us your questions. One of the other things that we will be doing is presenting or putting together responses to a lot of these questions that we're hearing, and definitely what our plans are for helping manage stormwater and trees is part of that. So, yep.
Okay.
Just before the holidays, we also expect that
By that time, that there could be a recommendation that's forwarded to the city council early in the year. But it's our aspiration that we work through a lot.
The city council will see it perhaps in January.
Assuming everything goes to plan, that's our plan right now.
I only have one quick comment, which is that this is the most exciting thing that's happened to Burlington in a decade. So everyone should come to at least one of the meetings.
Hold on.
I also agree with that. I think this is fantastic. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this evolves. The one thing that I am just slightly hung up on is like, I know it's just graphically, but looking at this North Ave fourplex, I look at the amount of parking that there is and I just like, oh, that could be another fourplex.
Right.
And I think, and it's and where those cars have to be and creating space for them. And I think that if there's ways to do this with like transit oriented, I think that could be something that takes a minute.
I'm taking a picture, which is about parking, and they'll make sure that that's. Is that okay? You don't want to turn back and forth right now?
No,
Okay.
I have an idea about parking, but I'll talk. Thank you very much. Mila. Last but not least. You have slides?
Yes, we're gonna pull some things up. I'm gonna piggyback off of some things that Tim said. And then I'm going to do a little show and tell. So I think it's minutes since I've seen you. I was here last year and we talked about what was happening in the city. We talked in particular about data. The big question in the city is, why do people say crime is down when crime is up? Remember, we had that discussion and we talked about the drug crisis, that two things were true at the same time. One being that overall incidents were down while certain types of incidents related to the drug crisis were up. And here we are today, where the drug crisis in the city, as we all know, had gotten exponentially worse. And therefore, the crime associated with that crisis has continued with those particular incidents, more cars being stolen, more larcenies, the overdose deaths, all that associated with it has continued to increase. And now we're at the point where we have roughly the same incidents that we had, I think it starting to surpass 2020 and 2021. So on August 17th, the Public Safety Committee, we had a discussion. It was kind of my point during that discussion was, as a city, we are still not doing enough to inform our residents about what is going on. We are still not doing enough to coordinate our efforts in addressing this crisis. We are not getting monies that are owed to us. We don't know why. And we currently have a governor that is not focused on this crisis. That's not to attack him personally in any way, but if we all recall, former Governor Shumlin, he did a State of the State address where he focused on the opioid crisis as it was back then, said this has to be a high priority. We have to think out the box because things that we were doing in the past that were considered to be accepted solutions are no longer working. So he was very engaged in the crisis. He encouraged thinking out of the box. He allowed new things to be tried that were effective back then. This is something that our mayor has talked about frequently. We now have a different type of crisis in terms of the drugs that we are seeing. I assume everyone in the room knows about fentanyl. We now have xylazine. I'm watching the effects of xylazine in other communities. It affects the flow of oxygen to the skin. That's why we see people, it's called the zombie drug. We see people with just exposed skin. They're not getting the medical attention. Other cities that have had xylazine longer are starting to see people having to come into the ER and get amputations, and then they're back on the streets again. So it's getting bad. What's happening in other places is catching up here. So the big conversation was getting people information, knowing what's going on, and advocating for ourselves. We do not have anybody lobbying for Burlington in an effective way. We need to lobby for ourselves. And part of the resolution that was discussed and voted on and approved last night was to have at least 2 public forums. I'm going to talk about my vision for the public forums, and is for the residents of Burlington, the employees who work for the city of Burlington, who are on the front lines of this crisis, employees who work for businesses in Burlington, business owners, even visitors to Burlington. You know, if someone used to come in and shop and eat in Burlington and they no longer do so, we want them to say why. We want our legislatures and our governors to hear why. They don't understand what's happening here. We need to put pressure on some of our own legislatures, and we need to put pressure on the people who are on committees that are in charge of releasing money. They have money allocated, they're not releasing it. If we don't know when we're going to get funds, we literally cannot make decisions about deploying those funds in a useful manner. Funds that we have received have been deployed to assist, and forgive me, I'm forgetting the organization, but they deal with people who are justice involved. A lot of issues we see around crime in our community have to do with people that get back out, they get back into doing the same thing. There are a lot of, there's a high percentage of incidents that are caused by a small percentage of people. Repeat offenders is a term that you hear frequently. If you can support them when they get out of jail to keep them in recovery and they don't relapse, they're less likely to go back to crime. This was an organization that has data behind it. They've worked with 168 unique individuals. So whatever new things we're trying, we want to make sure it's data driven. So data, extremely important. So if we could go to the city's website. So I am going to go a little bit farther than Tim did when I talk about the meeting we had last night. And if you could click on the calendar, please. And the government meetings calendar. So when you want to look around for information, this is where you start. The city's website, the calendar, the governor's meeting calendar. And you see the list of dates, and you can scroll backwards to past meetings. And if we go to the meeting that we had last night, yep. So these, you'll see upcoming meetings that are scheduled, and that slowly gets filled in as committees schedule things. But going to the Burlington City Council meeting that was last night. Oh, there we are. Regular City Council meeting. Beautiful. And then it says agenda. And Burlington is now using something called Civic Clerk. If anyone ever used board docs, it was a little bit cumbersome. I do believe that City Clerk is much better, but like learning anything new, it takes a few tries to use it. You can just click in City Council, or just you don't have to. Oh, there you go. Wonderful. And then meeting overview, the box in the upper left-hand corner, that's the best place to go. Then you have the agenda, and anything that is attached to the agenda items you get to see. So if you scroll down a little bit, this is your consent agenda. Lots of juicy stuff in the consent agenda. You want to know how your money is being spent? This is what you look at. Also approval on prior city minutes. You don't have time to watch a whole city council meeting. You don't have to. You can look at the minutes. You can say, what interests me? What do I want to know about in more detail? So you can read the minutes and then go to take a look at the meeting. Lots of stuff from BOF. That's the Board of Finance. Since I've become a city councilor and I've learned about the consent agenda, I am convinced that there was probably a lot of stuff about Burlington Telecom in the consent agenda. We'll never know. So wants to research that, that would be pretty interesting. So as we continue to go down the, if you can click on the drug unit presentation. So this is a PowerPoint that was used by the 3 members in our drug unit. So when I say I want to go a step further than Tim, where he recommends watching this meeting, I'm going to make very, very clear to you that this meeting is mandatory viewing for every Burlington resident. This meeting, a lot of you have been listening to me for a while, know I complain constantly about the lack of public engagement, the lack of getting information out to the residents of Burlington, because I hear the same questions over and over and over again. Being loud about that, the drive to do this resolution, the response that the council got and the Public Safety Committee got about the resolution is starting to cause a little bit more activity. So what was interesting, and when you watch the meeting, you hear them review this information. You want to know what the latest statistics are. You want to know the trends that we are seeing. You want to know what they're doing, what they've been able to accomplish, what they've not been able to accomplish, the street crimes unit not being available and how that's affecting us. When you file an online incident report or an online drug tip, you never hear anything back. Does anything happen with that information? Is it worth it? Should we continue to do that? Are we wasting our time? So I was very happy, well, not happy, but the admission that they have a backlog, the admission that, yes, we get this information, we eventually look at it, but because of staffing issues, they don't have the backlog to always reply to people. So that's for drug tip, but that information is valuable to them because it helps in terms of the drug tips. It helps them establish hotspots in the city. Where are they going to focus their larger investigations on? So they are focusing on going after dealers who are bringing in large quantities. So they're the, don't know if you ever watched the Power series on Stars, highly recommend it. Distro would be the slang for it, who's distributing to the lower end dealers. The street units, the street crime unit would be the ones who are going after what we would see day to day in City Hall Park. And that's not happening. So I don't want to go into that discussion. I can tell you that they do in this meeting. So you can watch it at your convenience, maybe not watch the whole thing at once. You know, the fact that these are recorded, it really gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of getting the information. The larceny, the retail thefts, enforcement, the next level. This was an excellent, long overdue presentation, probably because it's very difficult to get these 3 gentlemen in one room, you know, and they're probably doing this. They probably did this on their time off and not being on the clock. And I really appreciate that. Different initiatives. So this is really important. And if we could go back to the main agenda page. Oh, I'm sorry, for the city council meeting agenda page. Great. So then there's the information on the resolution that we voted on. Then there is also in the meeting, the presentation from the fire department and Chief LaChance. He is an amazing leader. He has already done so much. I love the fact that he gets information from his staff. He is getting a new program up in 3 weeks. In 3 weeks. That's how they think out of the box. That's a very nimble department. And they have a goal to get this started, I think, within the next week and a half. And it literally would be from within 3 weeks of having thought about it, of his staff saying, we have to handle this in a different way. The fire department is out there. The fire department's every day, all day, dealing with these overdoses or quote unquote man down, or calls where someone sees someone just like passed out in the street, in their cars, don't know if they're okay, don't know if is it drugs, is it not drugs. Sometimes it's just someone who's unhoused, who's not, doesn't have substance use disorder, but it's just sleeping because they have no place else to sleep. And other times they have to administer Narcan, etc. He has done, if you could click on Burlington Fire Department response data, please. Chief LaChance is great about data. And he has provided data. So as you can see, these are responses that the fire department has dealt with, and look where we are, a significant increase due to the overdose crisis that we're seeing. So 2023 has already surpassed 2021, and the on track for 1 year total responses increase is double digits of 12%. It could be worse. It could, I think it's potential to get worse because we've had a couple of weeks where we've had really just something was really bad mixed in, and we had huge number of overdoses in one particular 24-hour period. But this document is a great document to go through average overdose responses per month. And then his notes about the increase. We're on track for 526 overdose responses for 2023. Now, the fire department and the police department don't have the exact numbers. A lot of times they respond together, and sometimes, and that may be necessary when you bring someone out of Narcan, depending on what they have in their system. Like if they have meth in their system, when the Narcan hits and they come out, it's like the meth kicks in. So you may need police there because of that, because of the way someone doesn't come out of Narcan and they're like, oh, thank you so much, I really appreciate it. That's not what's happening. And then he has some other data about transporting people. Some people don't want to be transported, even if they recommend that you should be transported to the hospital, you should be checked out. If they appear to be in sound mind, which once they've had that, they may be angry, they may fidgety, but they can make a decision for themselves. You're not going to force them to go up to the hospital. And you can kind of just keep, just so everyone can see what's on there, just for time. I'm not going to go through every slide. I'm just saying, here's the information that you can look at your convenience in order to see what's happening. Very actually, if you go back to that blue slide, he looking in the system, the old expression he referred to, data in, data out, having to, when looking at the different ways that people get entered into the system. I'm sorry, if you go back to the top of it. And so he was looking at his numbers for the interactions and the number of people that they help who are houseless. Well, that could be entered as homeless. It could be entered houseless, transient. And then he realized, hey, this is too low. This is too low. We know that we're dealing with more individuals who don't have a place to live. And then talking to his staff, they're like, well, sometimes we just leave it blank. So then when he put in no address, the system pulled out significantly more. So there's a lot of interesting information here. Feel free to look through it. If you need any clarification, you email me, Zariah, Tim. If we can't answer it, we'll send it directly to Chief LaChance. He is very into community engagement, talking to the people of Burlington about what's going on. So the last thing I want to do is I want to show you where the police chief reports is and take you to Town Meeting TV YouTube page so you know where to find meetings. So if we can just go to the Town Meeting YouTube page, please. So when you just go to YouTube, you type in Town Meeting TV and it brings you here. And then you have the tabs. So starting at home and moving to the right, you'll see playlist. And when you click on playlist and scroll down just a little bit, they have specific created playlists. And if you go down under to where it says municipal meetings and click on the city of Burlington. And if we give it a minute, it populates on the right side. Now, these aren't exactly in date order, but the most recent meetings are at the top. You may find this one, the city council retreat. We talked about the August 14th city council meeting and how we would address future meetings. But as you scroll down, you'll see on the third on the list is the Burlington City Council meeting for October 10th. That's how you find the meeting. The first hour and a half or so were just executive sessions, so you kind of have to jump in to the start of the meeting. So, so that October 10th meeting is going to have the public forum that, as Tim said, was very engaging. It's going to have the presentation from the drug unit of BPD. It's going to have the fire department's presentation. It's going to have the presentation about the warming shelter. I do respectfully disagree with some of my counselors about the warming shelter. I think it is crucial. I am from the Central District. We are used to having all the services located in our area. I have worked and talked to and tried to advocate and support a lot of homeowners and businesses that have kind of alcoves or recessed entrances that people have been using for shelter. The fact that some of them are against this boggles my mind, because it's like you literally have people sleeping in front of your business. You literally have to walk over people every day. And so it'd be great to have that. Yes. Running low. Okay. So if we could just go back to the meeting list real quick. So the last thing, as you scroll down, I want to recommend that you find the police commission meeting, which happened near the end of September, and the chief will be reviewing his report, and that has a list of the latest incidents, in particular the ones related to drug crime. And he also talks about the online incident report, which is mostly property theft, and acknowledges that there's a backlog there, but people should continue to file those. Awesome. So we're really over time. I have business cards, or if you want to remember ME Grant, I'm not M Grant, there's another M Grant, but ME Grant at burlingtonvt.gov. Happy to answer questions related to public safety and this stuff. And it's great to see everybody again. Thank you so much for your time.
If we have any short questions about where to find information, because Mila showed us a lot of places, we'd entertain that. But other than that, I think we don't have time for a deep dive into the status of safety.
That was really helpful, just pointing out how you find that stuff.
Thank you. Thank you.
Carter.
Well, really quickly, because I'm wondering around numbers of on the recovery side, like not just preventing deaths, and actually like not having it repeat over and over when you're talking about the
fire department being at capacity. Anecdotally, I've heard that Act One is actually reduced beds in terms of same day and detoxes. And so I'm wondering where there's information where we can actually look at what recovery beds are available, what same day detox beds are available, what like overall, I guess, temporary shelters.
Two things came up. One, where are we seeing that data? We're really focused on our responses to the more critical things that are happening. But that came up as to where can we get that data? And Chief LaChance is going to be looking into that. The other thing that came up was someone mentioned that we didn't really address prevention. We're in such a reactive mode. So it's like, what is being done with regards to prevention? So that will be part of the conversation as well. More to come on that. Good question.
Thank you.
All right, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Have a great night.
No, that's okay. Hopefully this was interesting.